Team Fortress 2, Quickplay vs Casual. Which system is better? Should Quickplay return? Maybe Casual should be improved instead, but does that effectively turn it into Quickplay? Questions like these have been sparking heated discussions for a while. The topic involves technical elements intertwined with the game's rich history, which makes claims difficult to assess. Since so far I haven't seen the problem explored in enough depth for my liking, I've decided to go into it myself. For transparency, my mercenary badge is from 2014, but I only really remember playing post-Jungle Inferno. This means I have basically zero memory of Quickplay, or old TF2 for that matter. I've spent over 1500 hours in casual mode, and I semi-recently picked up playing on vanilla community servers, which quickly became my favorite way to enjoy the game. Despite my own preference, the main way people play TF2 is obviously very important, and so the main focus of this video is examining Quickplay and Casual, their history, upsides and flaws. From there, I'll present broad paths the game could take into the future. Historically and from personal experience, community servers are a very important part of TF2, and so I'll also examine their place within the game, and in relation to the future paths. My primary goal is to be informative and to help people form their own view on the subject, but I will include my own opinions where appropriate. First, to broadly contextualize the conversation, let's take a look at how the TF2 experience changed throughout the years. TF2 launched in 2007. The game was pay-to-play. It only had community servers, and you could only find a game through the server browser. 4 years later, in 2011, the Uber update made the game free-to-play. In the same update, official Valve servers and a Start Playing button were introduced. Players could choose a game mode, and they would get put in a Valve or community server. This was the first iteration of Quickplay, a more convenient way to find games. 3 years later, in 2014, Quickplay gained a Show Servers button, which presented the player around 20 servers to choose between in a visually simple list. Quickplay now searched for Valve servers only by default, players being allowed to opt into searching for community servers, alongside other preferences like random crits, damage spread, respawn timers, and increased max player counts. 2 years later, in 2016, the Meet Your Match update replaced Quickplay with casual mode. Valve servers became only accessible through a new skill-based matchmaking system, leaving only community servers in the browser. After an initial wave of changes and fixes, casual remained relatively untouched for almost 10 years, until present day. That's a brief overview. A full update timeline I made is linked in the description and on the screen. Knowing the historical context, let's compare the last version of the game with Quickplay to the latest version with casual mode. To begin, as mentioned in the history, under Quickplay the game had one server ecosystem, comprised of Valve and community servers. The server browser allowed filtering and sorting all servers, and Quickplay Search was a shortcut. Post Meet Your Match, there are two entirely separate ecosystems, Valve Casual Mode and the community server browser. The fundamental difference between Quickplay Search and casual matchmaking is the former being individual level and the latter being centrally coordinated. Individual level searching means the player's computer searches through a list of servers and picks one to join. Game coordination, also known as matchmaking, means each player reports wanting to play to a central service. That service collects a bunch of players, picks a server for them, and then simultaneously tells all of them to connect. Please note that by game coordination and matchmaking, I only mean collecting players and putting them into a server. This mechanism does not inherently have to be skill-based, and it doesn't preclude allowing direct connections. When someone says game coordination, and especially matchmaking, they may mean a few different things, so it's worth clarifying. Game coordination solves two major problems: multiple players trying to join the last free slot at the same time, leading to one of them being denied or bounced, and players landing in empty servers when all populated servers are full. Quickplay did not do game coordination, so these problems were present. The bounced connection problem was mitigated by only considering servers with at least 2 free slots, so 22 out of 24 players. This limited how often you'd get bounced at the cost of rarely filling the last slot. Landing in empty servers could and did happen. The contention with this issue is not whether it happened at all, but how big of a problem it was and how that compares to casual's problems. I investigated this by looking through old live streams and posts, but the solutions I'll mention later make this stop mattering, and so it's not worth the added runtime. If this sounds interesting to you, a Google Sheet with my findings is linked on the screen and in the description. If I end up making an addendum video, a link will be available in the pinned comment. Casual does game coordination, which means the bounced connection issue simply never happens. The matchmaker also avoids putting players in empty servers. There's an asterisk to this though, because players may disconnect before you load in. Mass disconnects frequently happen around map changes, and since that tells the matchmaker to put in more players, the chance of landing in an effectively empty server increases. There's also a flip side to never putting players in empty servers. Queues may last forever if there aren't enough players for the maps you chose, and currently there is no indication that this is the case. When forming a match, the matchmaker reserves a slot on the server. This reservation prevents the slot from getting sniped before the player can start connecting. Aside from that, Casual also keeps your slot reserved for around 1.5 minutes after disconnecting unexpectedly. This allows players to reconnect after game crashes, but it also means the slot can't be filled with a new player. The slot is instantly freed when using the disconnect button or joining a different casual game, but the quit command, forcibly closing the game or turning your computer off, will leave the reservation to expire for the entire duration. I'll get back to this thought shortly. For now, let's take a look at the choices players can make when searching for a game. Quickplay let players search for one or all game modes, but not specific maps. Players could opt into searching for community servers, purely vanilla or with slightly modified settings. Quickplay tried to find servers with good ping, but lacked a custom ping limit. I found plenty of complaints about PlayNow choosing games with bad ping, with responses often telling the player to use Show Servers or the server browser to choose a better one manually. Contrasted with that, Casual allows players to queue for any number of game modes or specific maps. Players can only queue for Valve servers, which all run the exact same rule set, and there's no option to choose your server. The only preference other than game mode and map selection is the ping limit. Closely related to queuing, Casual features a party system, letting up to 6 people queue for a game together. The whole party gets placed on the same team. Quickplay did not have a party system. Getting friends into one server involved picking a server with enough free slots, joining it, and having friends join either through Steam, the server browser friends tab, or the server's IP. Slots could get sniped before everyone got in. Friends joined whichever team had an open slot at the moment, with the option to switch later, limited by needing someone from the other team to leave. Aside from servers and connections, Casual also changed how the game is played. Before Casual, rounds were played until a 45-minute map timer expired. Casual instead forms matches, with a best-of-3 rounds format for most game modes, 2 rounds for payload and attack defend, and 1 round for capture the flag. This results in significantly shorter playtimes between map changes. After a Casual match ends, players are presented with a match results screen and 3 options to vote for the next map. The same map or 2 other maps in game mode, picked by the matchmaker based on what the players queued for. The server resets even if the same map is chosen. Since the map vote timer was shortened from 30 to 15 seconds, the results screen only lasts 5 seconds longer than it did under Quickplay. Before Casual, a vote for the next map could be initiated at any point during the game. Players could propose any map in the game mode or to extend the current map, which would increase the map timer without a server reset. At the start of a game, before the first round, there's a waiting for players period. Before Casual, this was a flat 30 seconds. In Casual, The timer starts at 150 and goes down to 60 when 4 players connect. The remaining time is only skipped in the rare case of all 24 players connecting, which in practice leads to at least twice as much waiting for players as under Quickplay. Last, but definitely not least, team balancing features. Before Casual there were 3. Scrambling teams between rounds, which could trigger automatically or be voted for, auto-balance, which moved players between teams when player counts became uneven, and manual team switching, which allowed better players to opt into helping the losing team out. Casual disables team scrambles and team switching. Auto-balance is present, but it isn't allowed to move reserved empty slots. This can be a problem, for example, when a few people on the losing team rage quit and their slots are guaranteed to stay empty for a minute and a half. This leads to other players feeling the match is hopelessly unbalanced and also leaving. Finally, Casual introduced skill-based matchmaking, with the promise of matching you into balanced games with players of similar skill. Since skill-based matchmaking, or SBMM for short, is described right on the update page as the main benefit of Casual mode, understanding it is very important for this debate. It is quite a technical topic, so I'll try my best to explain what it does and how. Let's start with a question. How does a computer know how good you are at a game? In an SBMM system, each player account has a matchmaking rating, abbreviated to MMR, which you also might have heard being referred to as ELO. MMR is a number, or a set of numbers, representing a player's skill level. When a player queues for a game, the matchmaker, which is a program running on a server, adds them to a list of players to consider. This list is repeatedly searched for combinations of players that could form a balanced match. A computer cannot directly balance the elusive notion of skill, but it can find combinations of numbers matching certain criteria, and this is exactly what MMR is for. Matchmaking algorithms usually consider more than just MMR. Ping, game mode, map choices, region populations, time spent in queue, etc. Exactly how this is considered is up to the developers. For example, many matchmakers will compromise on game balance or ping to avoid long queue times. It's worth noting that finding a best-fitting combination of numbers from a large set is a difficult and computationally expensive problem, which is further complicated by new players queuing and existing ones being able to cancel at any time. This means it's not trivial to just add in any number of additional factors to consider. When an acceptable combination of players is found, the players are put onto teams and a match is played. After the game, each player's MMR is adjusted depending on the outcome. Simplifying, winners gain MMR and losers lose it. This means MMR reflecting a player's skill flows from the game's outcome reflecting said skill. Please note that SBMM does not claim or assume that MMR will be a perfectly precise measure of a player's skill at all times. It is, by design, an approximation. Since the only consistent factor in all your games is you, on a long enough timeline your MMR will statistically oscillate around where you should be. The word oscillate, however, is pretty relevant because the matchmaker takes MMR at the point of queuing into account. If MMR oscillates by a lot, it will be less representative of a player's skill at any particular point in time. Additionally, even a very stabilized and accurate MMR cannot know the future. For example, players will have classes or loadouts they are better and worse with, and the matchmaker can't know ahead of time which of those the player will use, since they can be freely switched between. TF2 uses Glicko as its SBMM system. Glicko is a successor to ELO, originally created for chess, which is arguably the best case scenario for SBMM. It's a 1v1 game with no random mechanics. In team games, since each player has an impact on the outcome of the game, individual impact on the outcome is lessened. Random mechanics introduce lucky wins and unlucky losses, thus also lessening individual impact on the outcome. TF2 has both 12v12 teams and influential random mechanics, as well as a huge amount of player choice, which naturally gives MMR less predictive power. Casual kept those elements, but its overall design is consistent with reducing the impact of factors outside individual skill on the outcome of the game. I'll refer to this as variance reduction. First, Casual ensures matches are comparable to one another through only using Valve servers with a unified rule set. The match format emphasizes a definitive winner and loser, as directly mentioned on the Meet Your Match update page. The matchmaker forms teams and runs the game to figure out which team was better. If a player contributes to both teams, the relationship between their performance and the final outcome of the game gets muddied. So, to maximize MMR accuracy, teams need to stay constant from the beginning until the final result. Unrestricted leaving introduces a dilemma. Either the match continues with unequal team sizes, which skews the outcome, or players are shifted around, which muddies the outcome. This, I believe, is the reason for disabling team switching and team scrambles, disallowing direct connections, spending more time waiting for players, and reserving slots for players to reconnect. The same team preservation logic explains shorter matches. The less time a match takes, the less chance there is for players to leave. It is also in line with Casual launching with abandonment penalties, not refilling slots for matches in progress, and no auto-balance. Now, Valve never stated this outright, but I think it's pretty clear Casual is the way it is to make MMR more accurate through variance reduction. This means modifying Casual with features like team scrambles, team switching, direct connections, or longer matches will make SBMM even worse at producing balanced matches than it already is. To get started with potential paths for the future, I think this trade-off is worth it. I have a set of minimum effort, maximum reward improvements Valve should make to Casual immediately. Make matches last longer, restore team scrambles and team switching, allow autobalance and scrambles to affect reserved slots, restore voting for the next map mid-game with the option to choose any map in game mode. These changes would result in higher quality matches on a more diverse selection of maps. Implementing this should mostly be settings changes and relatively little coding, which I think makes for a very grounded proposition. Let's hypothesize a bit though. I see two main paths for the future of the game. The first simply drops SBMM entirely, which I'll call Rollback. The second changes how MMR is calculated and how matches are constructed, which I'll call Redesign. In both paths, mid-game balancing features like team switching, team scrambles, and auto-balance are crucial. In Rollback, they are the only balancing features, while Redesign uses them to pick up the slack that SBMM alone can't carry. Neither path is a dead end, they could both be developed further after the initial direction is chosen. The main benefit of Rollback is its simplicity and having been tested in practice. The final version of Quickplay was better than the current version of Casual, but that doesn't mean it was flawless, so let's discuss possible improvements. For starters, an adjustable ping limit seems to be a simple, straightforward upgrade I think nobody would have a problem with. From the complaints I've reviewed, not only could Play Now send you to a server with bad ping, show servers could also sometimes present a list full of 200 ping servers. A custom ping limit would resolve such issues. Another simple and straightforward upgrade would be multi-game mode search. Allow people to search for Payload and King of the Hill at the same time. Going further in the same direction, players could be allowed to search for particular maps, not just whole game modes. Being able to block maps you dislike may seem like another simple and straightforward upgrade, but it does have a downside. Let me illustrate. There's a small number of maps the vast majority of players like, and a lot of maps that are less popular but still liked by some players. A trade-off can be made. You play on some maps you dislike for the sake of those that like them, and in return you get to play on the maps you like that are less popular. Given the option to blacklist maps, plenty of players blocked not just maps they cannot stomach, but also those they could otherwise tolerate. This weakens or breaks the trade-off, polarizing the map pool. The most popular maps get played even more than their popularity would warrant. Map blacklisting under Rollback, however, wouldn't be in a vacuum. Being able to pick your server and vote for any map during gameplay would also affect map popularity to some degree. Players could effectively blacklist maps by not clicking on them, not voting for them, or leaving the server. This could be taken either way. It's basically already a feature, so why not add it? Or there's enough impact on map variety already, so don't add even more. Ultimately, it's a trade-off between map variety and player agency. I lean towards the latter. Frankly, I'd be more comfortable not having the feature if Valve committed to a higher quality standard for accepting maps into the game, but that's an entirely separate conversation. Autobalance and team scrambles weren't perfect. They determined which players to move using total points. This meant a player that accumulated 40 points over 5 rounds was treated the same as a player that got 40 points in 1 round. The simplest improvement would be to use points per minute over the last n minutes, but the game also tracks kills, assists, healing, support, headshots, and other metrics that could be used for more accurate performance estimation. This could be tuned in practice until it achieves better outcomes than just using points. I mentioned earlier that bounced connections and landing in empty servers are issues tied to individual level searching. For this reason, I proposed the Play Now button could use a game coordinator, just not a skill-based one. This means never getting bounced and never having to wait in an empty server. Players would be gathered under the hood on the search screen and put into a server together. This doesn't mean bringing in casual-style restrictions like using only Valve servers with one rule set or team preservation measures. Those restrictions are due to the skill-based part, which is not mandatory for game coordination. Everything other than the Play Now button would still be individual level searching and rely on direct connections, meaning bounced connections and having no populated servers to join could still happen. The 22 out of 24 rule mitigates bounces, and as a bonus leaves an open slot for server browser users. Aside from that, a case where all servers are full to the brim and only empty ones remain would be rare under the whole game's worth of traffic, since players would be continuously moving out of servers, leaving openings for others to join. Ultimately though, small inconveniences in game finding barely matter if games are enjoyable, last long, and map changes are worth waiting through. To illustrate, in the live streams I reviewed, for each game found there's an hour and 18 minutes of stream time. This game coordination proposition is why I didn't consider it necessary to go into the old live streams and complaints. Adding game coordination would effectively put Quickplay's game finding on par with casuals, leaving the skill-based elements as the distinguishing factor. Please note that before Meet Your Match, Valve had a working beta of game coordination for Quickplay. Never having to join empty servers was mentioned in the prompt to join Quickplay beta. I found an email sent to server operators mentioning they started with gathering 2 players before putting them in a server, with plans to increase that minimum when more players use the system. The other feature this Quickplay beta had was a party system, which rests atop game coordination. Introducing parties would make playing with friends much smoother, especially for new players coming from other games. There are, however, solid arguments against a party system that I'd like to address. Team stacking upsetting balance, a 6-player party being impossible to kick, and parties being used to flood servers with bots. A simple remedy would be to not put party members on the same team. Some people, however, like this feature, so let's suppose we keep the option and try to solve the resulting issues. First, let's allow team scrambles and autobalance to split parties that upset the balance too much. Performance estimation, like I described for scrambles, would help determine if a party causes enough of a problem to be split. Second, let's make party member votes count less. This would prevent party members from protecting each other from kicks and from kicking teammates on a whim. In Counter-Strike, for example, 4-player parties are not allowed to kick the one non-party player on their team. If this wasn't enough, a vote to kick an entire party could be added, perhaps for the whole server to initiate and vote on, not just one team. This would have to be tested and tuned in practice, because I can definitely see it being abused, but it is a possible solution nonetheless. Finally, for bots, the voting changes should already make it way easier to vote kick bots and make it harder for those bot parties to kick real players. Yes, coordinated joins of multiple bots are much more disruptive than individual joins. However, if we allow direct connections, there's nothing preventing bot hosters from coordinating raids with their own software. With the changes I proposed, bots would likely actively avoid the party system to be harder to kick. For these reasons, I think the botting issue is separate from the question of having a party system. That's how I see Rollback. Let's move on to Redesign. Where we have real-world evidence for the good and bad of Rollback, Redesign is more of a design proposal. The core acknowledgement it makes is that MMR has limited predictive power in the chaotic environment of casual TF2. There's a few ways to remedy this. MMR could be adjusted based on round outcomes instead of match outcomes, and it could take individual performance into account. For example, if you lost a round but played as well or better than you usually play, you would lose less MMR. These changes mean MMR reflecting player skill is no longer tied to the performance of their entire team over the course of a whole match. This lets Redesign loosen or drop variance reduction, notably including team preservation. Mid-round team changes would still affect MMR accuracy, but since MMR wouldn't be the only balancing feature, inaccuracies wouldn't be as big of a problem. Scrambles between rounds would not matter for MMR, and adjusting for individual performance would help counteract the noise from team switching, auto-balance and direct connections. Since we now have a more reliable MMR, we can use it to form more balanced matches. The question this brings up is, what does it mean for a match to be balanced? There's two broad directions Redesign could go in. The first is looking for 24 players with similar MMR, which I'll refer to as uniform skill. The second is looking for two teams with a similar MMR gradient, which I'll refer to as varied skill. Uniform skill is similar to weight classes or leagues in real-life competitive games. Varied skill is similar to a neighborhood football match. Everyone knows there are better and worse players, and teams are composed such that the best players balance each other out. Uniform skill prioritizes fair 1v1s. Each individual fight can go either way, and there's less cases of a worse player getting consistently stomped by a better player. Varied skill prioritizes interaction variety and natural learning. Playing with and against better players leads to learning, which is reflected in the gameplay. I used to die a lot to these players, but now I'm holding my own against them. This doesn't happen as much under uniform skill because as the player improves, so do their teammates and enemies. I think varied skill is more in line with TF2's design. Large teams, random mechanics, objective-based gameplay, classes for different levels of engagement, and a pace way slower than Quake's all limit the effectiveness of a singular veteran player, allowing even the noobiest of noobs to have fun contributing to the team and create a more relaxed environment that leaves space for aspects other than raw performance, notably including socializing. The counterpoint is that even with these inhibitions, pub stomping is a real phenomenon. Getting started in games where skill plays a huge role can be a harsh experience, leading to many new players not sticking with the game, leaving it to depopulate over time. TF2 doesn't exist in a vacuum. It competes for attention with many free-to-play games that all have a lower barrier to entry, and so it's easy for these players to go somewhere else if they get discouraged. The absolute best case scenario for onboarding is an easy-to-follow introduction and a way to get used to the basics without having to stomach continuous stomps. So, functional tutorials for all classes, better default settings, and sandbox lobbies for players with low MMR and low playtime, allowing them to get used to the game together with other newcomers. As the player accumulates playtime and gets better, he could be matched with a wider gradient of MMRs, which would present more challenge, introduce variety, and facilitate further learning. Sandbox lobbies require a controlled server environment and at least decently reliable SBMM, which is why they can't be done under Rollback. If what I presented so far sounds interesting to you, look into Team Contrast 2. A lot of the ideas I mentioned come from that mod and its author, Mastercoms. Link in the description and on the screen. More improvement ideas from Mastercoms include adjusting matchmaking and using contracts to increase map variety, and consolidating servers between matches. For example, merging 3 servers with a few players each into one if they choose the same map. The list of ideas I mentioned is by no means exhaustive, but evaluating every possible proposition is outside the scope of this video. The point is, it's a proposal for something new. I think what I showed is sufficient to demonstrate that Redesign is a valid, serious alternative to Rollback. It would have to be implemented, tried at scale in practice, and iteratively adjusted. Thankfully, the core idea of collecting information and using it to make the game's systems smarter lends itself well to trying and refining new functionalities. Rollback and Redesign are primarily about Valve servers, as that's the default environment for playing the game. However, community servers were, at least historically, a huge part of the full TF2 experience. The focus on socializing with other players and openness to running custom maps and various other mods was the perfect environment for creative output: simple memes, videos, more or less serious animations, fully fledged maps. This output defined the game's culture, and that turned TF2 into the widely known and beloved phenomenon it is today. Because of this historical importance, and because I personally think vanilla-esque community servers are the best way to experience TF2, I'd like to talk about the place of community servers within the game. As a reminder, the game started out with only community servers. The Uber update introduced Valve servers and Quickplay Search to provide a predictably solid experience out of the box. Since Quickplay Search became the new path of least resistance, being eligible for it was key for getting players on your server. To be eligible though, your server couldn't run custom maps or make too many modifications to the game. So you had to compete for attention with Valve servers, but without standing out from them too much. The very addition of Quickplay introduced significant tension between Valve and community servers. To quote an email from a server operator to Valve, "We have been losing new traffic to our servers since Quickplay started." And a bit further down, "They created Quickplay, and if you wanted your server to participate, then you had to conform to using specific maps and keeping it vanilla. Otherwise, you risked not having any new people find you." Now, consider that Valve servers are a fully controlled and standardized environment, while community servers require ongoing moderation that naturally could never be perfect. If the goal is to provide a predictably solid experience, Valve servers only seems like the obvious solution, and that's exactly what happened in 2014. Quickplay was switched to search for Valve servers only by default. An option to search for community servers was introduced, but it was hidden behind a small cog icon, which did not make it naturally discoverable. Only those that explored the settings on their own, and those that already knew the option existed, would use it. Some server operators equated this change to banning community servers from the game, noting, quote, "The problem is obvious when someone connects to a pay-to-win server, while it is not as obvious when a server is dying over the span of several months because official ones are getting all the new players." This last, weak link to community servers would be cut from the way most players find games in Meet Your Match, leaving community servers only accessible through the server browser. Now, to be fair, those changes did not happen in a vacuum and without any reason. There are plenty of reports indicating Quickplay would send players to server networks that were unlike regular community servers, and not all servers followed the rules. To quote a Reddit post from a server admin, plenty of servers snuck into the Quickplay server pool by using workarounds to either run forced MOTD advertisements, have strange plugins that completely alter the game, or be filled with bots, making for a very unpleasant gameplay experience. Or even one of the worst offenders, Zines, which give advantages to premium members for a monthly fee. While Valve modified the game to prevent abuse of MOTDs, it appears they were not willing to actively play whack-a-mole to make sure the Quickplay server pool is clean. The gaming landscape also changed a lot over the years. During TF2's development, community servers were the default or only option in most games. As automated matchmaking became ubiquitous, new players wouldn't come with a pre-established knowledge of community servers. Even if those players saw the option to search for them, they wouldn't know why it would be worth enabling. Actually, if Valve servers provide a consistently good experience, what is the reason to play on vanilla-esque community servers? Well, one big reason is customization. Custom maps, no random crits, random damage spread, class limits, banning, reverting, modifying, adding weapons, etc. The other major reason is, well, community. Valve servers provide a quick, convenient way to play the vanilla game. This, naturally, leads to playing with people that also want the quick, convenient, and consistent vanilla experience. People, however, often play games, especially casual games, for reasons other than just gameplay, and amongst those reasons is meeting people, talking, and forming relationships. That's not to say it's impossible to meet and talk with people on Valve servers. I made a bunch of friends through simply being talkative on the mic, but the come-and-go nature of the environment means to play with the same people, you add them and go into a voice channel, which makes you less likely to speak in-game, and so the silence continues. Community servers are different. They have an owner, they have recurring players, often gathered around a more or less customized version of the game. There's a natural filter for who plays on community servers. You have to want at least a somewhat different experience, and be willing to endure at least some inconvenience compared to one-click queuing for Valve servers. This selects for more proactive and engaged people, but also some interesting characters. Also, a lot of community servers enable all talk, which allows players to voice chat with the other team. This fosters an entirely different, much more social atmosphere. Despite these upsides, vanilla-esque community servers remain, for the most part, empty. Based on trying community servers after a long time in casual, and talking with people that play there, I think a segment of the player base would enjoy the experience. What's stopping them is either being unaware, or being unable to find populated servers and not wanting to wait around with zero guarantee of more players joining. Addressing these issues wouldn't make community servers suddenly overtake casual in popularity, but I think it would be enough to make them a consistently enjoyed niche. Considering the negative attitude community server owners had towards Quickplay, there is some irony in suggesting bringing it back would benefit community servers. Nonetheless, integrating community servers into the main way people find games would be a big step towards making people aware of their existence and giving them a go. To maximize this, I think the option should be pulled out of the advanced settings menu directly into the main search window. Additionally, custom maps for vanilla game modes should be allowed, which would give community servers more wiggle room. Aside from that, let's inform players that community servers exist and give communities ways to entice players to join them. These ideas are mostly independent of Rollback or Redesign. Integrate community servers with Steam groups, add clan tags to the scoreboard, and let players open the clan's Steam group from there. This would let players represent their favorite community in an unobtrusive and convenient way, while also raising awareness of the existence of community servers in general. Building on this, add a randomly rotating community showcase panel to the main menu, with the community's name, description, and perhaps a banner image, as well as the current player count and an option to join. This gives communities an opportunity to catch a player's interest, which may make them try the server and perhaps stick around if they enjoy the experience. The Steam group integration should also include features for organizing sessions, to make it as easy as possible to recruit more players for sessions. Alright, let's tackle the big one. The server browser could use an overhaul. It's not unreadable or unusable, but it could be made more powerful and easier to use. First, let's put more information directly in the UI to lower the barrier to entry. I think the simplified list with larger rows, a map preview image, and a full game mode should be the default option. The image would help identify maps visually without having to remember their names, and seeing the full game mode would mean users can naturally learn what the prefixes mean. The current table view should remain available as a compact mode, and this preference should be remembered. It would be great to have more information about a server before deciding to join. For this, I propose a selected server panel with a name, description, banner image, and Steam group link, which would let communities tell players what to expect. The panel could also show non-vanilla server settings in a standardized way, as well as more images of the current map. The same panel could also house a friends list to make sending invites quick and easy and not require loading into the server first. I think this would make the experience of playing with friends almost as smooth as a party system, while being much simpler to implement. Aside from additional information, considering the list of available servers is absolutely massive and quite varied, the filtering system could be made more powerful. I wrote my own version of the server browser with the filtering features I'll describe, so if it sounds interesting you can try it for yourself. Link on the screen and in the description. The main improvement I've introduced is filtering server names with blacklisting of any number of phrases. This, combined with the option to white and blacklist tags, gives filtering a lot of precision. You can hide server networks, non-vanilla servers, servers named Team Fortress, or for example show only randomizer servers but without the all crits tag. To complement having more precise filters, you can save your elaborate name and tag setup as a preset, and then easily switch between presets depending on what you want to play. For example, vanilla-esque servers, randomizer, man vs machine, trade, and so on. You only have to set it up once. Scroll through the list, blacklist everything you don't want to see, save preset, done. Additionally, presets can be exported and imported through the clipboard for easy sharing with friends or publicly, which could be used for community-made starter presets for new players. A second big improvement is map white or black listing where the longest match wins. Blacklist PL underscore but whitelist PL underscore upward, and all payload maps except for upward will be hidden. Whitelist Corf underscore but blacklist Corf underscore Sweden, and only King of the Hill maps, except Sweden, will show up. Map filters can also be saved, so you can make presets like My Favorites or Corf and Payload except the bad ones. As a cherry on top of the server browser suggestions, if filtering is powerful and precise, the browser could have a Play Now button. Choose a preset for servers and maps, hit Play Now, and get put into a server. Maybe this could even be worked into the game's main menu. Think Quickplay search but fully customizable. Having presented what was, what is, and what could be, I'd like to briefly cover what I think should be. To recap, I presented a set of minimum effort, maximum reward improvements to casual. Longer matches, team scrambles and autobalance including reserved slots, and better map voting. I then outlined two hypothetical paths for the future, Rollback and Redesign. The main distinguishing factor between the two is their approach to skill-based matchmaking. Rollback removes it entirely, and Redesign adjusts it significantly to fit the context of casual TF2. Finally, I showed a series of ideas for integrating community servers better, which are mostly independent from the future paths. I think the simple improvements are agreeable and should be implemented immediately, regardless of future direction. If casual had longer matches, mid-game balancing features, and better map voting, the case for sweeping changes diminishes significantly, because it's a lot of effort for much less remaining improvement. It's worth considering that 10 years of casual, including the bot crisis, was not enough to kill the game, nor did it make the player base overwhelmingly switch to playing on community servers. This indicates to me that so long as players keep getting put in games, the question is less about survival and more about the character and quality of the main game experience. In other words, I think the correct framing for choosing between Rollback and Redesign is what should the main TF2 experience be? There is an obvious benefit to the ease of use and consistency of a controlled environment. Having opponents closer to you in skill and encouraged to play to win is appealing, especially if the gameplay is the primary thing you value about the game. The case for onboarding new players via sandbox lobbies is also strong. The market of free-to-play shooters is fairly saturated, and players that feel discouraged have a lot of options to switch to, many of which are more welcoming. On the other hand, you could argue that SBMM doesn't belong in a casual game at all. I certainly acknowledge there is an impact on player attitudes and behavior, and thus the atmosphere of the game, but I think never showing MMR to the player and having no reward for maximizing stats lessens this impact a lot. I think the difference between the atmosphere of a casual match and a community server are better explained by the drive-through nature of shorter matches, which should change, not having all talk, which Valve servers never had, and by changes in the broader gaming culture. Additionally, Redesign's SBMM could choose varied skill over uniform skill, exchanging fair 1v1s for interaction variety and natural learning, while still using MMRs to balance the two teams as a whole. While I do think getting better at the game and playing to win is important, I strongly value the social aspects of TF2, and I would like more people to experience playing on community servers. Looking at the two paths from this perspective, Redesign promises more new players sticking around for longer, thus more people to nudge over to community servers. Combined with discoverability features, I think it could work. However, it's really hard to beat the simple effectiveness of linking to community servers right in the main search UI. Seeing firsthand how hard it is to actually populate a session, that checkbox alone makes Rollback speak to me very strongly. The asterisk to the benefits of Redesign is that they are hypothetical. The vision sounds great, but even the greatest sounding solutions can come down when reality checked. Valve's track record with TF2 makes it easy to be skeptical. The historical evidence of the good and the bad of Rollback brings to mind the old saying of perfect being an enemy of the good. Regardless of that skepticism though, the unavoidable reality is that it all depends on what Valve is willing to do. The PR of admitting fault could be avoided by branding Rollback as casual too and advertising it as such. However, between Valve games behaving somewhat like tech demos, Steam being the frontier gaming platform, and their pushes into VR and other hardware, the people at Valve seem to be drawn to new, exciting things. This makes Rollback seem like a very hard sell. If you pardon the blatant personal bias, perhaps community server integration in the modern gaming context could be presented to them as something worth pioneering. The issue of not being very new and exciting might also apply to the simple casual improvements I listed. Those require a lot less work though, which I think makes them a good target for audience pressure. If you are not happy with how casual functions, do not spend money on the game and voice your opinion on social media and in Steam reviews. That's what they are for. Keep it civil and speak clearly to ensure your arguments carry the most weight possible. Regardless of which side you happen to be on, I hope you found this presentation helpful, and I very much welcome further discussion. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to TF2. To close on a more personal note, if anything I said about the social aspects of the game resonated with you, I'd like to invite you to play on community servers. You get long playtimes without server resets, explore a variety of maps far beyond what will ever be officially added, and meet interesting, talkative people that care deeply about the game. A few servers host regular sessions of vanilla TF2 and would be very happy to have you. You can sign up for session notifications through Steam or Discord, links in the description and in the pinned comment. That's it. Cheers. Man, what a video.